Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Now, we started a few months ago introducing some of our team members, and I am so excited today because we have another team member with us. Dr. Tami Dean is joining us as a fellow CHANGEmaker and has been with the US² team for a little bit of time here, but I just thought that her experience and her background would be a great feature for our next episode. Dr. Tami Dean, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for having me. And I'm going to try to keep it brief because, I'm a unicorn and have done all the things. But so as Megan mentioned, I am a part of the team and I'm so excited to be here. But I have been a career educator over 20 years, which I'll say that so you don't know exactly how old I am. But over 20 years in education, have worn 1,000 hats. So I've taught all levels, pre-K through graduate, college, um, everything really focused around social justice and equity. Um, Moved out of higher ed into more of a supporting role with some ed tech and best practice organizations focusing on how do we best meet the needs of students. That's really kind of what drives my whole career, right? Like,
Yeah.
how is what we're doing impacting the students at the end of the day? And I think one of the best ways we do that is supporting the educators in how to make that happen. So that's kind of the common thread throughout everything I've done. So I'm excited to be here and part of the team.
Yeah, I love that. And I know when we first started our conversations, there was just an instant connection of someone else who gets it, right? I know when I first met you, we were connected through a mutual friend or a mutual acquaintance and amazing person. And when she introduced us, she said, Megan, you've got to meet Tami. Like, she is cut from your cloth. Like, you all are sisters from another mister. Like, she was all about it, right? She said, you got,
Oh,
and I was right. Did she do the same
absolutely.
thing?
She's like, you have to meet her. Like, you two are like gonna get along. Like, she does what you do, like, and you know,
Right. And
and
it was like
she was
all these,
not wrong.
no, but it was funny because she's like, I don't 100% get what either of you do, but I think you both do the same thing. And I love that, right? Because it's like, okay, well, and she wasn't wrong, like personality wise. And then when we first started working together in a contract, so we went past the initial conversations, but
Hmm.
we brought you into a contract. I said, okay, so let's just do a quick review of resume. And I was like, I know you haven't necessarily done this. And you're like, yeah, I have. I'm like, oh. And then I was like, well, have you done this? You're like, yeah. I'm like, have you done this? Yeah. Is there anything you haven't done? Right. So, like, when you talked about being a unicorn, it's so true. And I think that it's very typical of educators who move through the craft, right?
Mm,
Because so many educators are asked to do so many things beyond their quote unquote job title. We call
yeah,
it the issue of the ampersand, right?
yeah,
And I think it's a testament to our educators of how much we're willing to do for our students. It's
yeah,
not about, oh, well, that's not my job title. It's okay, sure. If it's for the betterment of our students, let's do it. Right.
yeah.
And I think that's so critical. So thank you for sharing that. And I love how you call yourself the unicorn of
Well, I
doing
can't take
all the
credit for
things.
that. It's actually one of my former colleagues because she was
Okay.
she actually ended up being my supervisor when we were interviewing. She's like, "Are you sure you want to come here?" Because I was in a tenure track job at a large state university, and I was leaving that to go to like a visiting assistant professor position at a small private liberal arts college. She's like, "Are you sure?" And then she's always just same thing. She's like, "You just say things like everybody knows all the things you've done," and we're all like, "You did what?" You did that too. So she called me the unicorn. So now I just embrace it. So
There you
she gets
go.
all the credit for that.
Love it.
But yeah.
Love it. And you also made a point of saying that your focus is really on helping educators to be able to impact our students.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you? What does that look like?
Well, for me, I think, in my opinion, educators are typically trying to do what they think is best for their students. And it may or may not always be what is best because you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
And educators have 1,000 different things coming at them. So, what support are we giving them to think systematically and strategically about how things overlap to ultimately provide the best outcome for students, right? And supporting them as educators. Because as we know, educators are told like they're supposed to sacrifice everything, like their personal time, they're like all of these things. And if they're not there for the students. And for me, it's shifting that narrative to being how do I more intentionally do the things? Not that they weren't intentional in the first place, but how do I really
Oh,
streamline those things so that I can also still give space for myself and my family and it doesn't mean you are not here for the kids, right? Like
right.
that is a narrative that exists, which to me it exists because as we know, like education started off as all women and you had to be an unmarried woman and you had, like all of these rules and people don't realize how those still live beneath the surface, right?
Yeah.
And that's why that's happening. So for me, how do I do this, right? And is so important. So being an educator, right? And then I've been a coach, which I love coaching. I worked with preparing future teachers, right? And so that was like just so powerful for me. But one of the things I found with preparing future teachers is, you can do and say and show all the things, but then they go to a school district
Mhm.
and they may or may not be able to do all of those
Right.
equitable things when they get there. So for me, that's where the like career shift happened. Like where the rubber meets the road is where I want to be.
Yeah.
So, how do we support the leaders
Mhm.
to support the teachers to support the students, right? Like it needs to be this vertical line and with consistency, right? Like
Right.
because every educator knows about the one-off professional development where someone comes in and just does the one thing and then, years ago, this will tell my age, I used to get a binder and then the binder would go on the bookshelf, right?
Right.
With the training, right?
And
And then
then
you had
someone
all
say,
these
"Did you
slides.
refer to the binder?" And you're like, "No,
No,
it's
I
sitting
didn't
on
look
the
at the
paperweight
binder,
right now." What?
right? And I think right now for me, it's most important because I think a lot of educators feel like they don't have control of what it is they're able to do for students and what they know to be best. And
Right.
so helping support that voice that they have, the professionals that they are, right?
Mhm.
Because education is the one profession where everyone's gone to school, so they think they know what it means to be a teacher because they were a student, which are two totally different things, as you know.
Right.
So, how do we continue to support them to feel empowered, to feel control over the choices they make because they know their students best,
Mhm.
100%, because they are with
Yep.
them every day, you know, and that their voice is heard and matters
Yep.
so that we can, meet the needs of the kids
Yeah.
because no one likes to be bored in school, educator or student.
No. No. 100%. 100%. And it's interesting because, so many of what we do at Us Squared is about aligning to values, right? If you're
Mhm.
aligning to your values, then you're going to be successful. If you make sure that every decision aligns to your values. And it's the same thing for educators. If you can, as a school district, create values that really shift and shape and mold every decision you make, then people can buy into that and it will make a larger difference. But
Yes.
then there's so many outside influences as well that impact that. Like you said, we can at the university level teach teachers great things. I serve as adjunct faculty as well. We can teach them great things.
Hmm.
But then when they go to a district, they may or may not be able to implement some of the things that they were taught at the university level.
Yeah.
So at the district, we need to make sure that they're given that autonomy, but we also need to help our district leadership be able to set values and goals that align to that strategic vision of what they're hoping for.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think one of the important pieces is how are we bringing in the community into
All of the
that,
constituents. Yep.
right? Into those decisions. And
Mhm.
not just the community that have the space to be the loudest voice or have the most time to
Right.
show up, right?
In the middle of the day for a PTO meeting, is that what you're referring to?
That's exactly
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
what I'm referring to, right?
Yep.
Like, because, in my experience, what happens is this narrative comes out that these parents don't care, right? And I don't find that to be the case, right? Just like educators are trying to do their best to support students, parents, the majority of parents want what's best for their kids.
Mhm.
And knowing your community and the families involved, right? Do they come from a culture that values the schools and believe you are the decision makers, right? And so
Right.
they trust you. Their work schedule doesn't align with when you're having meetings and things for people to give voices. Are you setting it up so it's welcoming to
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah.
Or is it only welcoming to a certain subset of
Right.
families? And
Yeah.
not intentionally, but like you have to,
And that's the whole thing, right? It's not, I don't believe, and I don't, no one in our company believes that people are doing things intentionally
yeah,
to harm, especially educators, right?
right.
It's that unintentional. It's
Yep.
that, oh, well, we have an open door policy. Nah, here's the thing. Who's going to walk through an open door? The same people who would walk through a closed door. An open door policy is not going to do anything, right?
Yeah.
It's about how do you bring and welcome in those voices who are going to come because they feel like they're welcomed and invited,
Yeah.
right? Because an open door policy sounds great. I'm always here. But here's the kicker, the people who use that policy are the same ones who would use it even if you had a closed door policy.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
it's how can we make the environment one that everyone is seen, heard, welcomed, and valued? There's a lot of upcoming unknowns and there's a
Yeah.
lot of upcoming assumptions of, I mean, we can talk about so many of them, right? But teachers are afraid, and they've been afraid for many years
Yeah.
of what's next. We've had a lot of unfunded mandates over the last 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
even more so in the last 10 to 15 years. We have
Absolutely.
continued unfunded mandates, which, if you're listening, you're not an educator, that is, you're required to do this, but we're not going to give you the money or the resources to do it. Figure it out, right? So we've had a large influx of unfunded mandates. We've had a large influx of additional curriculum without anything falling off the plate.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, teachers are expected to be everything to everyone,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that leads back, and I love how you connected it to back in the day, you had to be a single, unmarried woman to be a teacher because they thought that if you were unmarried and a woman, then you could be the nurturer, the caregiver, the educator. You wouldn't have anything else pulling at your time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now we have a much wider variety of people in the teaching profession. And even if you are a single woman, does not mean that you're automatically going to be nurturing and willing to give 100% of your time, nor should you give 100% of your time to a career, to an
Yeah.
occupation. And
Yes.
yes, I believe teaching is a calling. I believe that what I do is a calling. I believe that you believe what you do is a calling. Some people have jobs, some people have professions, some people have careers, and some people have callings, right?
Yeah.
I believe what I have, what I do on a daily basis is a calling. When I was a teacher, I felt it was a calling. I committed 100% of everything into it. It wasn't healthy for me. I spent most of my paychecks on materials for my classroom because I couldn't get money for materials for my classroom,
Oh, that,
right? It wasn't
yes.
until I went into administration that I started to actually have a bank account because when I was a teacher, I was paying for books and folders and glue and scissors. I remember I had to purchase all of these things because I worked in urban
Yep.
districts.
Markers. Megan, I had to buy soap
Oh, yeah.
because
Tissues.
the bathroom didn't have any soap for my students. And we would ask and ask, like, oh, well, they just make a mess with it. They just will waste it.
So we want germs everywhere.
Yes. So I had a sink actually in the back of my room. So I always had soap in the back of my room. I was in middle school. There were no um like dispensary containers for feminine products for the young ladies. None of those existed. They wouldn't put them in. I had a supply, right, in my
Yeah.
closet for these young ladies, right? Like, but there's no soap. Like,
When
what?
I think back, like I have not been in a formal education system for about 10 years now. I started the company 8.5 years ago. So 8.5 years, 8 years. I've not been in the formal school system. But when I think back to my first job, I taught second grade, my first position. When I think back to some of the things I spent my money on, I spent my time on, I remember being in the school by myself. There was a custodian, I believe, but I was by myself in the school at 11 o'clock at night sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
like working all the time. And I remember my first job, I made $9,000 a year. $9,000 a year.
Oh, I'm trying to remember. I can't remember what my
My
first
first
dollar was.
principal position, I made $38,000 a year. My first administrative, I was an assistant principal, but my
Yeah.
first administrative position was 38,000 a year. How can I mean that's an assistant principal, like you're in the building all the
All the
time. You have
time. And
so
then you
much
got like
responsibility.
all the evening stuff, like all the
And the
things.
stress of the adults. I could deal with all the children all day. The stress of the adults. And it wasn't usually the teachers, it was usually other adults. It was just so much.
Yeah.
But I say all of that to say I'm so grateful to be able to support school systems now and not be in the school system 100% of the time. I don't know if you have a similar feeling. Do you have a similar feeling or what's your thoughts around that?
Yeah. I definitely
Okay.
have a similar feeling, and people have been like, oh, would you ever, go back into K-12 or back to being a professor, full time? And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, no. Because back to that calling idea, I feel like my best and highest use is doing the work that I do now with the people that are in the school district or
Yeah.
at the university level working with the teachers, right? Like I feel like all of those experiences there were vital to make
Yeah.
me who I am and how I'm able to support those educators now. But that is
Mhm.
not something that I would go back to. So I'm trying to think. It's been 5 years since I've been in either university system or um
Okay.
yeah, or a K-12 building.
Yeah.
I adjunct now and then too, which is great, and I
Yeah,
have
I
so many.
love doing adjunct work. Honestly, love it. Give me like
I do. I
one
love the
course every
students.
2 years, love it.
I love all of the work, and I have so many professor friends, and they always joke. They're like, "Well, you want to come back?" I was like, "No, no, I'm good, but
Yeah.
thank you."
And
But
we have quite a few clients that are superintendents and such because we work with so many school districts who are like, Megan, are you sure you don't want to come back? I've got some
oh,
openings. I'll make a position for you.
I think people offering you and myself and all the other, people at us squared like come back to the school district. I think what that speaks to is that the people in this organization, walk the walk and talk the talk and are able to connect really well with the needs of what's happening in K-12 schools, right? Because
Yeah.
as an educator, we've all experienced the like disconnected consulting company or the whatever disconnected someone who tries to come in, right? And so to me that's just a testament to what you've put together for us to be a
Mm,
part of with you.
thank you. And that leads to the question I was going to ask of what made, I mean, you have a resume and a heart that just sings this work. What made you choose Us Squared and how did we get so lucky to be able to work with you?
Well, as you already mentioned, right? We had a mutual acquaintance who brought us together. But well, first of all, I'm a really strong woman of faith, and I believe God puts the right people and the right opportunities in my path, as this is a calling, right? This is
Mhm.
part of my purpose. And I don't think I met you by accident, right? And everything that this organization does aligns with what I believe to be true and best for not only educators, but the world in general, right? Like when
Yeah.
we think about people and equity and justice and all of those things, it just like speaks to my heart. And I tend to be someone who leans into my gut and an
Mhm.
opportunity that comes my way. Because when I've not done that, I totally experience the consequences of that. I'm sure I'm not alone, but that's why I'm here, right? Like
Yeah.
this work is my passion, it is my calling, and it also brings me a lot of joy
Mhm.
to connect with others around this work and continue to build that community, right?
Yeah.
And connection, because that's really what to me drives social justice, right? Community, connection, conversation.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Like it's just the alignment is uncanny, right? You know, there's those moments like in life where you're like, wow, did that really, this is really happening. Like I remember being like, oh my God, after we first talked, I like called my friend. I'm like, oh my God, she's my person. Like she's great. Like this is where I'm supposed to, I'm doing it.
Love it. Love it. And maybe eventually we'll be like full time together.
Oh, maybe you never know.
You never know, right? But right now, we're going to just enjoy the time we have together making this impact.
You know, my grandparents, um, spoke Spanish fluently, right?
Mhm.
And it was in a time frame where it was better to assimilate.
Mm.
So they spoke Spanish, but my, mom and her siblings never learned to speak Spanish, right? And, they didn't necessarily have the same opportunity or access to education, right?
Mm.
And then I just look at the trajectory of those decisions. Like I look at my parents' decisions. So, you know, my dad went in the army, then he started working full time. My mom eventually went to school, um, got her associates, and then did all the things. My mom now has a doctorate, right? But did that later in life. Like I am the first generation of our family to have the privilege and the opportunity I went right to college from high school.
Yeah.
I was first one, you
And
know,
that's a lot of weight as well.
right? And so when I think about that legacy, right? But even the people don't leaving that, and then my kids, right? Like this is part of that. What are the decisions? What are the work? So there's a privilege that comes with me having a doctorate and having had that experience that I was able to then, you know, pass to my kids if they
Yeah.
wanted to choose to do that, right? And I think about other people that are in my community who didn't go to college and they're like, I don't even know how to navigate this. Well, I have multiple viewpoints in that. I was a professor, right? So I was outside in, helping my students. So I'm like, let me know what you need and I will help you navigate this with
Yeah.
your child because you don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
And those are the things I want to do. Like, I don't
Yeah.
do this for accolades or, the work, but I do want to leave a positive
Yeah.
legacy in the world. Right.
Tami,
Absolutely.
thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you
It
for
was
having
such a
me. Always a
wonderful
pleasure.
conversation. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you are not already subscribed, please make sure you subscribe, follow us on social media. You can also check out our newsletters. We are here to support you. We are here to provide some insights, have great conversations, and we'd love to talk to anyone else out there who might be interested in having some conversations around this topic. So reach out to us. We are looking for podcast guests starting in second quarter of 2025. So please reach out. We thank you for listening, and everyone, let's make 2025 the best year yet. Have a wonderful